Hello and welcome back to the Knight. In this chapter, we're going to look at 6th move h3, e5, and now 7th move knight d2. After e4, c5, knight f3, d6, d4, cd, knight takes d4, knight f6, knight c3, a6, we have our knight. And now the 6th move h3, e5, my recommendation. And here we looked at 7 knight d3 in the previous chapter, and now it's time to look at the main move, knight d2. I should also mention knight f3. We haven't even made a chapter for it. It's knight f3, white can play against, after any move, he can play bishop e3, e5, knight f3, bishop e2, e5, knight f3. These are very popular ways of playing a4, e5, knight f3 also. But also after a move like a3 or h3. I believe against these two options like h3 or a3, we just play with the usual way, e5, knight f3, now bishop e7, for example. If white develops with bishop c4, which is the most popular move, we play bishop e6, bishop b3, and knight bd7, very similar to the bishop e3 variation. In fact, after bishop e3, we land in a position which we could get also from the bishop e3 variation. There is not much sense in bishop g5 now that the knight has been reinforced by the other knight. So this is just fine. After bishop e3, for example, we can play rook c8. Again, very important here not to castle, as I keep repeating, this bishop 6 f knight g5 trick is just the end of it. So we should really be very attentive to that, and that's why we should never fall into this. Play rook c8 first, castle, and now here we can play knight c5, bishop 5, rook c5. We took one of the white's bishops, and now we have to beware that this knight does not come to d5 via b4. After knight e1, rook c8, knight d3, we have to play a little bit accurate with, for example, queen b6. Definitely not allow knight to b4. Immediately a5 is also possible, but after queen b6, a3, now it's very important to play a5. Knight b4, knight bd5 would really be a game changer. After that, white gets a small, stable, very stable plus. Nothing to worry about, just perfect control over the d5 square. But as long as the knight on d3 doesn't have that b4 square, black is doing very well. The weakness of these two squares is not too relevant at all. After check, black can even play king f8 and then plays the king on g7. So no chapter for 7th knight f3, but basically just very similar to the usual knight f3 systems. And also it's not very common, neither at the high level also nor at the amateur level. Knight d2, however, is how they mostly played. The idea is to go g4 and follow it up with knight to g3, a very harmonious regroup. Knight from g3 will eye the f5 square, so a very poisonous setup. And here I had always found it remarkable, especially as a youngster. When this system became popular, I was just a aspiring young grandmaster, very inexperienced, and when the system came into prominence, black started playing the move h5 here, which I found at first very shocking, but now that I'm already used to it, I understand that this is definitely justified here, especially because the knight is on e2, and that is because if white cannot push a g4 but has to, for example, settle for a g3, then knight on e2 is really looking for squares, whereas if white were to get g4 in one go after, let's say, a random move and then g4, and then knight would come to g3, the knight would be perfectly employed. So this h5 is very important in this particular case with knight on e2 to not allow the knight to harmoniously develop on g3 after g4, knight g3. So h5 is what we do. There used to be just two main options here. White was choosing between usually g3 or, sorry, let me remove these other arrows, or the bishop g5 option. But there have ever since been many other new interesting developments, and there are now many moves that we can look at in this position. I propose to look at them one by one. So first, knight d5. Knight d5, very interesting idea. Not very good. But the point is to trade this knight and then get the other knight to c3. The whole idea is to somehow get the e2 knight to to enjoy a good square. After knight d5, we take, queen takes, and play knight c6. Very simple setup, intending bishop e6. So we gain a lot of time on this, on chasing this queen back and forth. So that's why this is not the most poisonous system for blacks. After queen d1 back, white anyway has to drop the queen back. We play bishop e6. And after knight c3, I propose rook c8. It's a well-known move. It's a very good move. The idea is that after knight d5, bishop d5, now white does not have queen takes d5 because of knight b4, and if he takes with the e-pawn, as we will see, black has a good position in this particular knight of structure. There are two moves here, bishop e3 and bishop e2. Bishop e3 is not accurate. It's been played by Wang Hao, but I had prepared against him in a World Rapid game. It was quite fun. We had like 2 minutes in between the game and the announced pairing, because the World Rapid Championship is held with many games a day. So as I saw that I play Wang Hao, I had just 2 minutes. I looked up his last game against Naidorov. It was exactly this. I switched on my phone. I think it was phone computer, or no, I think I actually managed to connect to my home computer through some remote software on my phone, and saw that after bishop e3 I should play knight e7. And so I came to the board, and after we blitzed out all of this, I blitzed out knight e7, and my opponent was very impressed because he couldn't imagine that I've had time to prepare. But fortunately, in these 2 minutes, I managed to anticipate his choice. Yeah, knight e7 is just very fine. After bishop e2 d5, we simplify the position. It's of course a highly unusual move, blocking the bishop, but it is very concrete. We just push d5 next move. White doesn't have a better move than bishop e2. And after d5, ed knight d5, knight d5, queen d5, I got a very comfortable endgame, and I even got to press, and Mahao only escaped after I made some inaccuracies. So bishop e3, bishop e2 is main move. Now we play g6. We stabilize the h5 pawn and intend to develop the bishop to g7. And now I place knight to d5. Otherwise, with knight on c3, we have this very strong d4 square available for the knight. So white has to do something. He goes knight d5, bishop d5. Now he takes with the pawn. As I mentioned, queen d5 is met by knight b4. That's the point of the move rook c8. Very important, because if white were to take with the queen and be able to play c3 afterwards, he would get some sort of a grip over our position. So better to avoid it. And after ed, knight b8. B8, by the way, is a strong move. Knight is heading to d7, and here it's important after castle to not try and be clever and trade these dark square bishops. I have learned it. I wouldn't say the hard way. It wasn't just in a blitz game, a casual blitz game, but I was very surprised. I played bishop h6 in a blitz game, then I got outplayed, and then I looked at it and I realized I shouldn't trade bishops here. Black is not able to consolidate after bishop h6 because white very quickly will trade and then get the move f4 in, and the knight will not get to e5, and white will start a play on the queen side. Just very unpleasant position for black. So very important not to trade bishop h6 and discoordinate the whole position, but play bishop g7 and then castle. In fact, there is no even need to trade the bishop. Bishop on g7 is pretty strong. An example line is c4, castle b4. Now we play a5, a3, knight d7. This was my second game against the same opponent when we played training blitz games. And after rook b1, b6, white has no play because c5 is never possible anymore. And this blitz game I managed to win very convincingly because white is just lacking play here, and we want to push with f5 and e4 at some point, and we don't really need to trade these bishops in fact. So it was a good lesson for me, and also something important to not play bishop g7, not bishop h6. This is for knight d5. There is also a funny move, knight g1. This is a very aesthetically pleasing idea to get the knight to g5 square, which has been weakened by h5. And h5 was aimed at limiting the e2 knight, and now the knight is sort of using h5 against us. And I believe the line has been played too many times at the high level in the blitz games, because white is just, I believe it was Jan Nepomucci who played it many times. He was so impressed with this idea, with the beauty of it. He played it far too many times. The problem for white is that he spends 1, 2, 3, 4 moves. Sorry, much more. Knight went from f3 to d4 to e2 to g1 to f to g5. He spends 6 moves trying to get to g5 in the opening, while black will develop all his other pieces. And that is just a little too much. You cannot spend so much time playing with the same piece. And so after b5, which I played against Jan when I later, after I already saw he played the system a few times, b5, knight f3, bishop to b7. Of course, when the knight is coming to g5, our scheme, development scheme of bishop e6 is no longer good. That should be understood. So that's why we employ the bishop to b7. So here b5, knight f3, bishop b7, knight g5. White is in time to prepare the e4 pawn, to defend, the e4 pawn. And now after knight b7, bishop d3, we play bishop e7. So while white was in time to defend it, it still remains weak. Knight comes to c5. After castle, knight c5, white lacks ideas here somewhat. Knight on g5 is actually not doing that much, and black is already better. Jan played here f4 against me, and here I should have played b5 and just winning material, frankly, because if e4 is going to hang, and if white plays knight d5, then we have knight d5, ed, ef4, and the knight is hanging on g5. So yeah, beautiful idea, but just not very good. The computer says black is already better here after this development of the bishop to b7. Nonetheless, good to know, and good to know, first of all, not to be too impressed, and also to develop the bishop to b7. It's not the usual development scheme, but with the knight coming to g5, there is no better square for the bishop. There is also move 8, bishop e3. I'm not sure what exactly the point of this move is, but it's just a developing move. So it is not too bad, but it's also not great. We play here bishop e6, and yeah, if white plays f4, we play knight b7. After f5, we go bishop c4. This piece setup is not ideal. We have seen something similar after bishop e3, e5, knight d2 right away. So it was not very good for white. If knight d5, then we take ed knight b7. We have this typical knight structure, and here black is doing very well. If white plays c4 here we do go for g6, knight c3, and bishop h6. Because with the extra pair of knights, this is different. And yeah, that is what makes chess complicated. That you know, in one position it's bishop h6, in the other it's not bishop h6. But basically, here the situation is different. After the f4 push, the knights are much better located. One is on f6, protecting the f-file, and white's c3 knight is in fact not very good. So this is a much better version for black. Now after takes rook h6, bishop e2, we play king f8 and king g7, artificially castle, bring the rook back to h8 and e8, and black is fine here. Instead of c4, white can play 11 knight c3, and now there are many moves here. I believe I just picked one of them, the most aggressive idea, queen a5. But can also just play normal developed pieces and have a very decent position. In general, in these structures where we have 4 pawns against the 3, we have good potential for kingside play, and white is trying to play on the queen side, but now with knight on c3, it's not entirely clear to me how he's going to make use of his pawns. Nonetheless, queen a5 is very strong. If white plays queen d2 here, stopping the move knight e4, because that's the threat of this pin. White plays queen d2. We have a very cunning, beautiful plan, bishop e7, followed by bishop d8 and bishop b6, employing the bishop in this way, which is very original, and that's one of the reasons behind of why we play queen a5. Also, rook c8 is next. After 12 bishop to we do knight e4, and after castle we can take on c3, bc, and now go g6, develop the bishop, and queen can go back to c7. These doubled pawns are pretty bad for white because he no longer has any pawn storm incoming. The c5 square is blocked and is now cannot be attacked by the b pawn. So it's basically outpost for the knights here potentially. Bishop e3 not very good because of bishop e6. Now it's time to look at two main moves, bishop g5 and g3. Bishop g5, a very serious move. It's been played a lot on the high level, and the logical idea to trade on f6 and then install this knight on d5, the other knight to c3. Black plays here bishop e6. Bishop e7 here is not as good because of knight g3, and the point is that as knight f5 is incoming, we have to go g6, and now white has the time for bishop to c4, and he's developed pretty harmoniously here with his pieces. So bishop e7 is not ideal. We should go bishop e6. Here white again has a choice, but bishop f6 is by far the most popular and the most well, dangerous or principal move. There are other moves as well. White can play g3 here as well. It's very subtle. The idea is that compared to direct g3, white avoids certain setups. For example, setups where bishop goes to b7, which is what I'll be recommending after bishop 7, bishop g2, as you will see. But white did commit his bishop to g5, which is not necessarily ideal square for the bishop after g3, bishop g2. And here we play bishop e7, bishop g2, and now b5. b5 is principled, but knight bd7, a4 positions are also very, very playable, especially because the bishop on g5 is not too well placed. I'll just explain you why. So I'll take knight bd7, a4. In some cases, let me just give you an example. Line, castle, castle. Let me bring the rook, let's say, to c8, play queen d2, just for example. And now let's say knight h7. And now we, with knight h7, we ask white whether he wants to trade. And the point is that if, let's say, he goes bishop e3, we play h4, g4, then we managed to win a tempo on his bishop moves, while actually knight on h7 is pretty well placed because we want to fight for that g5 square for the dark squares. So bishop on g5 not ideally placed. Also in some lines, there is a knight takes e4 tactic as well possible, like here knight e4, bishop e7, knight c3, knight takes d1. These kind of tactics are also in the air. So bishop on g5 not too well placed, but more principled is 10 b5, and it works quite well. Now after castle we go knight bd7, then we have a very good setup with both the knight on d7 and the pawn on b5, which white usually tries to prevent with a4. And here if white plays knight d5, we can take with the knight. I can also take with the bishop. I had a similar game with Hare Krishna. I took with the bishop, got very good position. Take with knight is good. Ed, bishop f5, bishop e7. Now I wanted to show that black can also take with the king here, not only with the queen but with the king as well. And after the white tries to open the position with our king in the center, we have a very strong idea: queen b6 check, and after king h2, bishop to g4, using the tactics and the fact that hg is not possible because of the check along the h file, using this tactic to serve strategic means and to trade the bishop for the e2 knight and get a strong knight on e5 that will be not touched by the white pieces. And the king on e7 is very strong, not very strong, sorry, it's very fine here because the center is pretty closed. And that is for 11 castle. After b5, bishop f6 is more principled before black gets time for knight bd7. Now we take on f6 and knight d5. We can castle here. And here it's quite important for white to play h4. Otherwise, we sometimes get these squares, dark squares for ourselves. So white plays h4 here. Then we just develop knight c6, castle g6, and intend bishop to g7. And after let's say queen d3, we go rook c8. We currently want to take and play knight b4. And if white protects, we will drop the bishop back to g7 and trade the knight with knight e7. And black has a pretty decent position here. And there were again alternatives to that. That is for the move g3. There is also a rare move f4. We play knight bd7, f5, bishop c4. As so often, we have the c4 square when the knight is on e2. Knight g3, we go rook c8. We had seen similar positions in the bishop e3, e5, knight d, e2 line. After bishop c4, rook c4, queen d3, we support the rook with queen c7. And now there are... sorry, I had pause for a second because I had a deja vu. Because we had seen a very similar position after 14 long castle in the other line. Now we also go rook takes c3. This happened in Naroditsky van Kampen. Van Kampen is my good friend from the Netherlands, who was also a very good theoretician. Recently he's not too active with chess, but still a very strong grandmaster. But he could have taken on c3, and after queen c3, bc, h4, we win the e4 pawn and have very strong compensation. And we've been seeing this very, very similar endgame in the bishop e3, e5, knight d2, I believe, chapter. So, as I said there, I'll say that again, when the white pawn is on f5, our e5 pawn is now a protected passed pawn, and f5 pawn is also very weak. And in these cases, it's enough for black to have just one pawn for the exchange for more than enough compensation. Instead of 14 long castle, knight ge2 is a little bit more careful on move 14, and now we go for d5. Another thematic push that we have also seen, and in similar positions. Now, if knight d5, there is rook c2 after the trade, and after e d5, we have e4, and after queen d2, bishop d6. Just a long-term positional compensation. No need to rush to win back the d5 pawn. It takes away the square from the knight, in fact. And we have the strong pressure along the c file. We want to go b5, b4 at some point. Castle, and we seem to have a very, very good position here with black, very comfortable compensation for the pawn. Besides knight f4, and knight g3 is also a sideline. This is not promising here when bishop doesn't get to this diagonal. This is fine for black. We have knight b d7, in fact, and after bishop e2, g6. And if white tries to make sense of his piece setup and try to reroute this g3 knight to e3, then this fails to rook c8, knight e3, rook takes c3, bc, queen a5, with a very good position for the exchange sacrifice. The point is that knight takes e4 is a threat. Bishop on g5 finds itself in a very uncomfortable spot, and the tactics are against white here. Knight g3 is only good after bishop e7, not after bishop e6. After bishop e6, the main move is bishop takes f6. We take f6, knight d5, queen d8. And here, the simple way of playing is knight ec3. But the modern way, which is a lot more popular at the highest level, it was popular for a while, mostly because Vishy Anand really liked this position. Vishy Anand is very good with his knights. He really loves these positions with the d5 square. I've had also a lot of knighters with him. He plays them very, very well. He's probably the only person against whom I feel slightly less confident in these knighters, because I feel that Vishy has a very special feel for these structures, and that can obviously be explained by, first of all, the fact that he is tremendously talented, and also combined with the fact that he is so experienced in this Nidorf. If you look how many games Vishy Anand had against Nidorf, probably we are speaking about hundreds of games. So, but you don't have to play Vishy Anand, so don't worry. And even if you do, I have, by the way, a decent score with Vishy Anand in the Nidorf, but just from my experience, he's one of those the most dangerous proponents of it on the white side. And so, yeah, Vishy Anand mostly played queen d3 here. But knight ec3 is a very fine setup for white. Here we do have the bishop pair, so we have to develop our dark squared bishop with g6, bishop c4. White gets a very comfortable square for his bishop on b3. We play here bishop h6, castle e castle. White brings the bishop to b3. We play knight to c6. Now that the knights are on c3 and d5, we have this d4 square available for our knight. That's why we went to c6. And after queen d3, we can play rook c8. Rook c8 is the go-to move in the Nidorf, almost always good. And now, actually here too, there was a game of Vishy Anand. He won as well with white again. But after the opening, black was fine. He played knight e3, knight d4, and knight cd5. And here black, I think black was playing too defensively. He can play much more aggressive here with queen g5. If white was king h2, then queen h4, threatening rook c5, followed by f5 when the d5 square dominance becomes less obvious, as we will also be able to take the bishop sometimes, and the knight on d5 is a bit shaky after all that. So that's for knight e3. Rook a1 is another move. Now after knight d4, white has the move f4, and a lot of trades, they lead to equality. For example, we take on b3 and maybe if we take on f4, and after knight takes f4, we can play queen to g5, and after king h1, we play rook cd8, followed by queen e5, or even bishop g7, bishop to e5. And white has this control over the d5 square here, undoubtedly total dominance over that square. But we have our dark squares, and white's dark squares are rather weakened. When we bring our bishop, for example, to e5, these squares are going to be weak, and our bishop is going to be tremendously strong. So I believe these factors are balancing each other out. And this all has been played in many corresponding games. Here also f5 has been played instead of knight takes b3 in many corresponding games, and black scores very fine here. And that is for 11 knight e3. By the way, it's a fine way for white to play. It's pretty safe, but black is very fine. And again, there are options also, especially as I mentioned after 17 f4. Besides the simple way, this f5 also is to be investigated. So definitely not a problem for black. Queen d3 on move 11 is interesting, quite double-edged, but white is being very ambitious. He is trying to castle long. That's the idea. And only then will he get the knight to c3. So he's trying to castle as quickly as possible. Here we play knight d7, bring eventually the knight to c5, push on the queen side with b5, and our f8 bishop gets developed usually to g7. But we should look at concrete variations. Very interesting lines here. Long castle, g6. And now there are a few options. Knight ec3 is not, excuse me, not as popular as king b1, I believe, but it's very interesting, giving the e2 square for the queen. So after b5, king b1, knight c5, white plays queen e2. Here we have to go for play on the queen side. We go rook b8, intending to push b4. And after a3, we are finishing our development with bishop g7. And next we want an idea that I played against Surya Ganguly in another position. Very strong concept, bishop d7, overprotecting the b5 pawn, intending a5, b4. And next, we might want to regroup our c5 knight via e6, even to d4. So it's a very clever regroup, this bishop d7, something you should always be on the lookout for. And it gave me a very good position against Ganguly in a similar lines we will see later. So h4, bishop d7, and yeah, here followed by a5, knight e6, knight d4. Black has very good, very good chances. 13 king b1 is the main move. Now we play knight c5. Here white has two queen moves, queen f3 and the strange move queen a3. A very interesting concept played by Duda this year, in this year 2020. White wants to play a knight ec3 and shut his queen away from the king side. The queen will sort of try to protect the king, while white is going to go for a play on the king side only with his pawns. Very interesting concept. But here I propose also an interesting idea in h4, fixing these dark squares, not allowing white to go for h4 followed by f3, g4, fighting for light squares. h4 interesting. Knight ec3, bishop g7, and now bishop c4. Interesting way of developing. Castle and knight e3. After d5, white can play bishop d5. Very unusual position. Now we use the fact that the queen is oddly placed here. We play rook c8. Sorry. We want to threaten b4 after queen b6 and a5. White plays b4 right away. White has to do something, address the issue with the queen on a3. If he does nothing, sooner or later he will have to anyway push for b4. So here he goes b4, and now a very strong counterpunch a5. Idea, of course, if bc we have b4, and after queen takes a5, we trade the queens, and after b takes a5, we play b4. And in this endgame, the e4 pawn is suddenly falling. After knight b5, we can take bishop d5, And if e takes d5, we have knight e4, hitting the f2 pawn, intending knight f2 fork, and also knight c3 check potentially. And after knight d5, threatening knight e7, we play rook a8, threatening both the e4 pawn and the a5 pawn with a fine position. That is for the queen a3 idea. Again, very risky idea for white. You should also play very carefully not to get worse. You should play this move b4 at the right moment, for example, here. Not something I would like to play with white, but a very ambitious concept for sure. Forwarding queen f3 is the main way. Now I recommend bishop g7. We have to finish our development. Knight ec3 and b5. This position was debated in many games. Vishy Anand himself played it a few times. Other players also followed as well. White is trying to play on the king side. Black is trying to play on the queen side. I always felt black has a lot of potential here. Pretty easy play against the king, and sometimes also he can try to open the diagonal for the strong bishop on g7 with a 5 and e4 in the long run. But white, of course, has this dominance over the d5 square, which I'm sure was the reason why Vishy tried this for so many games. I'm sure he liked this knight on d5. So let's look at different attempts by white. There are three moves here that I'll look at: rook g1, bishop e2, and knight e3. After rook g1, we play rook b8. And here, b4. Well, this is one of the ways white is trying to deal with our unstoppable queenside attack. Just try to push for b4 and then hope to cement this position. But it's, of course, in the long run, the opening of the a file is going to be quite tricky for white. After knight d7, g4 is the way to go. h4, and now queen e3. The idea is to meet bishop h6 with g5, so not let us have control over these squares. And now we castle, and we want to trade the d5 knight at some point with knight b6 and open the a file with a5. And the point here is that it's very hard for white to maintain control over both the a file after eventual a5 and rook a8, and the d5 square as well. So very often we'll trade one knight, then switch to the a file, and at some point, if white will switch with the rook to the a file of his own, then the knight will be hanging. Well, as long as white takes with the pawn, then I consider the knight as hanging, because taking with the pawn is a huge concession. So we can activate the bishop, and d5 pawn will cover our weakness of the d5 square. So this is sort of the idea. We will see this in a similar position also in another line. 16 bishop e2 is also a move that was the one that Ganguly played against me. Rook b8 was my move. Now I want to push for b4. Ganguly played a3 here first, and I went bishop d7. This was this very important regroup that I prepared already back then, and Surya didn't meet it very well. I played after queen e3 a5, and after b4 knight e6. And here Surya made the natural move, and then after knight d4 I got a very good position. I was winning at some point in that game. But white still has a fine position here. He's still okay if he finds a very strong idea, h4. The point of h4 is to meet knight d4 with very strong move queen g5, trading queens. Of course, once white trades queens here, the weakness of the king immediately no longer becomes a factor, and that changes everything. So h4 is a very deep prophylactical move, but here we play differently. We take on b4, ab, and play knight f4. We trade this knight once, and after g3, knight d5, knight d5, bishop e6, we have that same situation as in the other case where I spoke about white not being able to control both the a file and the d5 square. So very often we castle, then we carefully bring the queen somewhere to, let's say, b7, and after rook a8, it will be hard for white to control the a file and the d5 square as well. So a very good idea to know this bishop d7, knight e6, and then also this concept of these two factors, the a file and the d5 square. Now we should look at the move 16, knight e3. That was Vishy's idea. as well. He wanted to bring the other knight from c3 to d5, and now we no longer have that before idea kicking the knight. Here we castle. Now after knight cd5, we have a different idea. We have a strong move f5, opening this bishop, with white having moved his knight from c3. The e4 square is quite weakened, and we have this ef5, e4 push, when the bishop, of course, is going to be tremendously strong on this long diagonal with lots and lots of attacking possibilities. After rook g1 first, white wants to push g4, and after h4, g5, and make sure our bishop is locked up on g7. So that's why we go bishop h6 here, very strong. And now after g4, we have h4, and we want to bring the bishop to g5, control all the dark squares, close down the fight on the king side, and make sure we have excellent bishop on g5. Here, if white goes for knight f5, we have bishop g5, very strong, very important. The d6 pawn is not a problem for us at all. We can always sacrifice it. The most important is that we have control over the king side and still a long-term attack on the queen side. If white tries to be clever, plays g5 first, move 19, then we take on g5, knight f5, and now we play rook a7, good defense. And after rook d7, we will defend our queen here from the attack on along the d file, and the bishop on g5 is still well guarded by the queen. So a very strong resource here. So g4 essentially doesn't quite work. Instead, if white plays 18 knight cd5, we play king g7, and that is a very important moment here. Now, if white plays g4, we have a very strong idea, bishop d5 first, because now if we play h4, of course, that would be a disaster because of knight f5 check. When we have to address the issue here, cannot take because of the opening of the g file. So here we take on d5 first, and after knight d5, the knight is already gone from e3. Now we play h4, followed up by bishop g5, and the fact that we have given up the light squared bishop is not at all an issue here. I believe this covers all of bishop g5 move. Besides seeing and potentially remembering these variations, I believe it's very important to feel these positions. You don't have to, I think, know them by heart. There are different options. Of course, the lines I gave are just, they're good lines for sure, and they're relevant lines, but there is, of course, there's potential to deviate with both sides, with white and with black, always. Neither of is a rich opening. You know, I'm not, it's not like it's all finished and I'm presenting you with the final program that you have to memorize and that's it, the game is over. No, that's not the case. I just gave you, of course, relevant example lines, but I think it's very important to feel these positions and know these ideas. I think, you know, for example, this b5, bishop d7, knight e6 regroup, the f5 push, sometimes opening the g7 bishop, and all these different ideas. This bishop h6 idea, controlling the g5 square, this bishop h6, and then bishop takes d5. All these ideas very relevant, could be relevant through different move orders and transpositions. So I think it's important that we saw so many of those. Now it's time to look at the 8th move, g3. Separate line. It's a very big line. One of the main challenges that black was facing in the Najdorf at the highest level a few years ago. Ever since that, black has discovered many different ways. There are lots of different setups. It's possible to play the simple way with bishop e7, bishop e6, knight bd7 setup, just like we would play against, for example, bishop e2 system with e5, knight b3. It is also possible to go for knight bd7 first. Idea of this kind of moves is that after bishop g2, when I say this kind, I mean that knight d7 right away, or bishop e7, bishop g2, knight d7 here. Both are similar. The idea of this is that now after bishop g2, we want to play b5, and if white plays a4 here, we want to play b4, knight d5, and can take the knight, and then we have this ba square for the rook. And the problem with knight b7 is that white starts with a4, and then black has to develop more modestly with b6, bishop b7, which, by the way, is also a big variation. Then the small issue is that our queenside pawns are a little less active than usual. It's not on b5, but still we have a lot of counterplay there. So that's also a line to that you can choose from. And finally, there are variations where black is going for a b5 push, not immediately because of a4 will be a bit premature, but after bishop e7 or also bishop e6. Bishop e6, bishop g2, b5 is a very big line that I played myself at the highest level. But later I played also with bishop e7. I believe bishop e7, b5 is well, it leads to whole different, or basically to different kinds of complications. It's just a matter of choice here. But I decided to choose bishop e7 here for this particular series. I think it's pretty good. It's also the system I played in the last game against Jan Nepomniachtchi in the Paris Grand Chess Tour tournament. So after bishop e7, bishop g2, we play b5. Obviously, if white starts with a4, he's weakening the b4 square, and knight can land on b4, supporting the d5 push after bishop e6. So white plays bishop g2 pretty much always, and now we push b5. So let's look at the options. Here, if white plays a4, we play b4, knight d5, and we can already take and play rook a7. Same we do without a4, b4, but in this particular case, a5 is even stronger, and we have this strong pawn on b4 supported by the a5 pawn, and it's very important in this structure, particularly in this structure, because the knight on e2 now doesn't have the c3 square, also doesn't have the g3 square, so it's just a very poor piece. a4 is very bad. A castle not accurate as well because of knight b7, and after knight d5 takes, we have this extra option of rook b8, and also knight b6 here. Knight d5 right away is the best move and the most challenging move. White intends to follow up with knight ec3. One other line black can play here besides knight takes d5, which is my main recommendation, is knight bd7, allowing knight ec3. This is also a very sound line for black. There have been many games. I think Boris Gelfand played this system with one of the move orders. He defended it quite successfully. I think it's a fine system, but I like knight takes d5. We're trying to disrupt white's play a little bit and not allow his e2 knight to visit the d5 square so easily. After knight d5, queen d5, we play rook a7. Of course, slightly odd, but you can't have it all, and the rook will be fine along the 7th ranking and can switch to b7, c7, d7. It's pretty fine there. Here, white always plays bishop e3, pretty much almost always. Jan Nepomniachtchi played against me queen d2. I played knight d7 and got a good position eventually. But even stronger is bishop e6, knight c3, and now rook c7. Pretty nice idea to be able to meet knight d5 with bishop d5 when white has to take with the e-pawn, not with the queen. An idea we saw also earlier in the knight d5 system after each knight d2 h5. 12 bishop e3 is the main move. Of course, white usually attacks the rook with the tempo, and now we play slightly awkward looking move, rook b7. The idea of playing rook b7 before the tempting bishop e6, which you would think is the is the better move, a strong intermezzo, but it's not strong. The point of rook b7 is that we wait a little bit. The queen from d5 anyway has to go back. It has no business on d5. d5 square is reserved for the knight. But we don't necessarily have to go bishop e6. We might keep the bishop on c8 and develop the knight instead to f6. So a very subtle play here, all revolving around that d5 square control. And here white has a choice. There are a lot of transpositions, by the way, so let's look at them one by one, not to get confused. Queen d2 is possible immediately or later after castle. Queen d2, you go knight d7. Here again, there are a few moves. So if long castle, we play b4. Here it's not very good. This long castle b4 is strong. We take away the c3 square from the knight. And also, we want to start our queenside play. After f4, a5, g4, white's trying to push. He doesn't really have targets, though, on the king side. So our play is a bit more effective. We go h4. We not only close the kingside, but much more importantly, we take away another square from this knight. This knight on e2 is just a total disaster. So here we play the g5, rook c7. Another strong move, and it's a typical idea, giving that b7 square for the c8 bishop. As we go on bishop b7, we have a very good position. We intend to attack the e4 pawn with knight c5, and white knight on e2 remains set piece, and actually he has trouble defending that e4 pawn. Instead of long castle, we also look at move b3, very subtle move, and prepares the move g4, because if white played immediately g4, there would be a mistake because of knight b6. Threatening knight c4 and also the g4 pawn at the same time. So that's why b3 prepares that. After b3, you play rook c7. Again, common idea, freeing that b7 square for the bishop, putting a rook on the open file, and supporting knight c5 push. Now g4 is possible. Knight c5. Also interesting is bishop b7. There's a funny line, bishop b7, knight g3, g6, gh5, and f5. Very complex, but I decided to advise a simpler solution, knight c5, gh5, because pawn was hanging on g4, rook h5, h4, while trying to open up the files on the king side before castling long. Now we go bishop g4. We want to get rid of the knight, because knight has the potential now to do some damage already on d5, so we take knight after long castle bishop e2. After queen e2, rook h4, we have a very unclear position. White has, of course, some compensation. He has a little bit of a safer king, but we have good dark square control, an extra pawn, and pretty solid position still. It's still pretty close, and I don't feel too much danger coming from white's position, because he doesn't really have any particularly active pieces or open files for that matter. The g4 short castle is more basic. Then we go bishop b7. I started bishop b7 because if we castle, there is the move a4, b4, a5, and after now bishop b7, white has rook a4, is in time to take the b4 pawn. And after bishop b7, first a4, b4, now after a5, black has queen a8, and white does not have time to go rook a4 to take on b4. So that's why bishop b7 first. Now white plays after a4, b4, c4, and then we play this close position with a5. We have the c5 square. We'll castle short. We play queen to a8, putting pressure on the e4 pawn. f5 is our long-term idea. Position is fine. I give an example line: rook a1 castle, h4. With h4, white's fighting for some dark squares here. Play queen a8, f3. Now we go f5, and after bishop g5, a very nice subtle idea is to give a check on a7 first, and after king moves to h2, now play knight c5, and the point is that after bishop e7, rook e7, queen takes d6, we have protected the c5 square, the c5 knight, and play rook e6, hit the queen, and then the b3 pawn is falling. That is for the move 14 b3. Finally, we can look at the move 14 knight c3. Now we play knight f6, again fighting for the square. If bishop g5, now it's important. White wants to achieve two things after trading the knight on f6. So after, let's say, bishop e6, bishop f6, bishop f6, white wants to achieve two things. It's very important to understand. White wants to be in time to play knight d5, which he can do. And the second thing he needs is to get control over the dark squares g5 and h4 with h4. If white were to, let's say, make a move, get both of these, he will be slightly better. Again, not a disaster. I mean, even position like this, frankly, it's really not a disaster. Very defendable. But we don't want to allow that. We don't allow him anything. We will want to play here h4. Very strong, getting these squares, and now the bishop has that access to the g5 square, and that is quite important. So if knight d5, we have h4, and if h4 first, then we have very strong move rook c7, and now knight d5 we take, and there is no queen d5 because of rook takes c2. So important to be precise, not to give white anything. castle transposes to 13 short castle. We'll look at that move order. And 15a3. This is also possible. And here we can play bishop e6 or castle first, or even a5 first, but I prefer the castle first. Now, castle, we'll look at this position from another move order, 13 short castle. Here, white has an extra option of g4. That's why we might want to start with bishop e6, but actually g4 is really not dangerous. White's trying to provoke us on the king side, but we're not going to take the pawn, and then this so-called attack is not going to lead anywhere. We play bishop e6. So a5 is possible, but the idea is to meet g5 with knight d7 now harmoniously, and next we want to push with a5 b4. Bishop f3, white's trying to prepare rook g1, open the g file for the rook. We play a5 here, and now let's look at the example lines. After g5, we play b4. Typical for the knight of meet g5 with b4, don't give him that d5 square. This is a good for black. If gh, we also go b4, ab, now we can take the rook, activating the rook. White's king is also very insecure, so this play on the g file is not that dangerous. After rook g1, king h8, it's important that bishop h6 is not mating us, because we have rook g8, and if white takes on g7, bishop g7, rook g7, in h6 we have rook h7. That's an important little nuance. If white plays 18 rook g1 first, we can play b4 ab. Now if we take with the rook, white will play b3, and we have to also deal with the threat of g5. Here I propose a pawn takes, and after knight takes, we can take with the knight, but I like to take with the bishop. Bishop takes d5, e5, e4, bishop d1, and bishop e2 is pretty much the same. White can never castle long anymore, obviously, because the king would just get mated along the a file. So white drops the bishop somewhere, and now a knight d7, a very strong move. Knight comes to e5, bishop comes to f6, and this gh is not a big deal. We stabilize with bishop f6, knight e5, and the open g file does us no damage at all. h6 always can be met by g6. White in his turn, he is not doing too great. In fact, besides the open g file, his king is quite unhappy in the center, and he hasn't achieved very much. He's got pretty passive bishops. So complicated position after castle g4, but in most cases, white is just trying to go short castle. So this g4 business was just an attempt to, with white to be clever, but we just ignore that. And again, you can also play bishop e6 here first. We've looked at, no, we haven't looked at the long castle yet. I'm sorry, we looked only at the queen d2 first. Long castle first is also possible. And it's also better than starting with queen d2. So long castle, knight d7, now white plays king b1, castle white plays g4, play h4, again taking away the g3 square from the knight, as we have seen. f4, white's trying to put some pressure, but okay, it's nothing dramatic. We go knight b6, activating the knight, so with the tempo, d3, knight c4, bishop c1, and here we start our queenside play slowly with a5. I mean, white's play is also pretty slow. Our play is also pretty slow. So there's not like there's some serious dangerous attacks, but it's just that we have a fine position. We have a long-term play on the queen side. I don't really see danger on the king side. After f5, for example, we lock everything with bishop g5. We control fully the dark squares here on the king side. White has no attack at all. Now to knight c3, we play bishop d7, improve the bishop a little bit, bring the bishop to c6, and everything's quite well about this position. Bishop on g2 is pretty bad. Black is doing very well. Long castle is not very dangerous. Again, the white problem is here. There's just no real attack going here to g4, h4. It's not clear how he can open the files on the king side. So let's look at finally the most normal attempts. White just playing short castle, knight d7, queen retreats to d2, castle, and knight c3, and now knight f6. This position can be reached with various move orders, and it's sort of a tabia of this line. Now if white plays here bishop g5, we hit the knight with b4, and after bishop f6, knight d5, we, as I already mentioned, take these squares. Very importantly, fighting for these dark squares on the king side, not allowing h4. Instead of 16 bishop g5, 16 a3 is also there. Now we can start with a5. We can also start with bishop e6. f4 here is not dangerous. After a5, we'll push with b4, start counterplay after f5, bishop c4. We have tempo on the rook, and next we go b4, kicking this knight away. White usually goes bishop g5. And here we play a5, we prepare a b4 push, and now there are two different ways for white to try and get what he wants. So he would like to get, once again, bishop f6, knight d5, and h4 in at the same time. If he tries with h4, we play b4, and after ab, bishop f6, we have bc3 idea. We don't allow bishop f6, knight d5, which, as I already mentioned, such a position would be a small disadvantage for black, but we don't allow that at all. We go bc, and after bishop e7, cd, bishop d8, rook d8, we have equal pawns, and white is unable to protect his queen side. I think if it goes b3, there is some direct issue with rook to c8, and he is going to lose one of his queen side pawns, and will lose the d2 pawn, and then it's only black who can be better here. Instead of h4, white can try to take first. Now after take, of course, if knight d5, we have this h4 idea, and if white plays h4 here, then now here this rook c7 move is not possible because of knight takes b5. And although that's also up for debate, but a very strong resource here, and a typical idea in these kind of positions, and something we should keep in mind, especially when you have this bishop on f6, the dark squares that we dominate potentially, and white has this pawn on h4 and g3. Always an idea to keep in mind is the move g5, a very strong idea here. I am sure black can play also more defensively, try to play this position for equality, and I'm sure it's possible to manage. But I really like this g5 fighting for counterplay, and after hg, bishop g5, we activate our bishop. We will get rid of this weak pawn with eventual h4 push, and after f4, bishop h6, our king is very safe. Because also, if need be, we can play f6 and switch the other rook to g7, and we control the dark squares. We have the bishop pair, and next we want to push h4, a fight for this now for these dark squares, and with this dark square bishop, we have pretty good prospects here. All in all, a lot of variations, especially on the g3 system, but in short, g3, bishop e7, bishop g2, b5. Knight d5 takes rook a7, bishop e3, rook b7, then knight d7, knight f6 in some order, and then already black is doing well. We want to play bishop e6, b4, and just nothing particular is going on. So in fact, a pretty easy setup, and don't get confused with all the long castle and all the subtle lines like when you do knight d7, b3. That was just my attempt to try to be very clever with white, but in fact, mostly it comes down to this, and pretty simple system for black. Yeah, I believe we looked at a lot in this chapter. We briefly touched knight f3, we looked at knight e2, h5, and now touched the sidelines, knight g1, bishop g5, knight g1, sorry, g3, bishop e3, looked at bishop g5, bishop takes f6, a great deal, and of course covered h3, bishop e7, bishop g2, b5 as well. Been quite a journey, so thank you for watching. I think with that we conclude. 6th move h3, 6 h3, e5, knight b3 is in the previous chapter. So once again, thank you for watching, and see you in the next chapter.